Hello, my name is Madison Dunn, and I'm a secondary education social studies major here at Cal U. Today we're going to be learning about the bloodiest war in American history, the Civil War. The top 5 major causes of the Civil War include economic and social differences between the North and South. An example of this would be Eli Whitney's cotton gin made the South a one-crop economy depending on cotton and slavery. Second, state versus federal rights. Since the time of the Revolution, two camps emerge, those arguing for greater state rights and those arguing that the federal government needed to have more control. That being said, there was already a visible divide. Third, the fight between slave and non-slave state proponents. As America began to expand, first with lands that gained from the Louisiana Purchase and later with the Mexican War, the question of whether new states admitted to the Union would be slave or free. The Missouri Compromise passed in 1820 made a rule that prohibited slavery in states from the former Louisiana Purchase. Fourth, growth of the abolition movement. The Northerners became more against slavery. Sympathies began to grow for abolitionists and against slavery in the slaveholders. This occurred especially after some major events including the publishing of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Dred Scott case, John Brown's raid, and the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act that held individuals responsible for harboring fugitive slaves even if they were located in non-slave states. And finally, fifth but not least, the election of Abraham Lincoln. Even though things were already coming to a head when Lincoln was elected in 1860, South Carolina issued its Declaration of the Causes of Secession. They believed that Lincoln was the anti-slavery and in favor of northern states. Before Lincoln was even president, 7 states had seceded from the Union, that being South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. This is just a map of those involved in the Civil War. As you can see, the Union states, the border states, Confederate states, and then the rest were territories. In 2 minutes, brainstorm as many facts about the Civil War as possible, so later you can compare and see what you learned throughout this presentation. Thank you. That was just a little bit of the music that they marched to in the Civil War. It's called Fifes and Drums. Now, April 12th, 1861, the start of the Civil War had began. The first battle of the war was at Fort Sumter. This began when Confederate shore batteries under General Beauregard opened fire on Union-held Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Bay. During the next 34 hours, 50 Confederate guns and mortars launched more than 4,000 rounds at the poorly supplied fort. On April 13th, U.S. Major Robert Anderson surrendered the fort. 2 days later, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln issued a proclamation calling for 75,000 volunteer soldiers to quell the Southern insurrection. This is a map of the battles of the Civil War. Not all of them, just most of the very important ones. The Civil War consisted of nearly 10,500 battles, engagements, and other military action, including nearly 50 major battles and about 100 others that had major significance. The remainder were skirmishes, reconnaissances, naval engagements, sieges, bombardments, etc. The engagements were fought in 23 different states and resulted in over 650,000 casualties. The Battle of Gettysburg was fought from July 1st to July 3rd in 1863 and is considered one of the most important engagements of the American Civil War. After a great victory over Union forces at Chancellorsville, General Robert E. Lee marched his army of Northern Virginia to Pennsylvania in the late June of 1863. On July 1st, the advancing Confederates clashed with the Union's Army of the Potomac command of General George E. Meade at the crossroads town of Gettysburg. The final day saw even heavier fighting as the Confederates attacked the Federals on both left and right. On July 3rd, Lee ordered an attack by fewer than 15,000 troops on the enemy's center at Cemetery Ridge. The result is known as Pickett's Charge. It managed to pierce the Union's line, but eventually failed at the cost of thousands of rebel casualties, and Lee was forced to withdraw his battered army toward Virginia on July 4th. In November of that year, President Abraham Lincoln delivered his most famous speech at the dedication of the National Cemetery at Gettysburg in only 772 words. Now, in this video, we're going to hear a little girl recite the Gettysburg Address.
At JCPenney,
it'll play after this short advertisement. I'm very sorry.
Necklaces, bold black tops, and bright colored dresses. Shop our Love Mom sale and save $10 when you spend $25 or more with your coupon. Price to buy, guaranteed to love. That's getting your penny's worth.
So, they told me that you know the Gettysburg Address.
Yeah.
Could you do it for me? You could. Let's come to the front. Let's stay right here. Let's stand in the middle. And now I want you to do the Gettysburg Address.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation, so conceived, so dedicated, can long endure.
The rest of the video just goes on and how she meets this sculpture of Abraham Lincoln comes to life. It's a great video, and Little Big Shots is a great show. Check it out. Obviously, there was very many major generals of the Civil War. There were hundreds of generals commissioned in the American Civil War on both the Union and Confederate armies. Some like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, William Tecumseh Sherman are household names. They, along with many generals and commanders, both major and minor, were the commanders that led the troops and helped decide the outcome of most Civil War battles. You can refer to history.com/Civil War generals for a much larger list. I put the link in below so that anyone who wants to know more about the generals could read about them. The final battle was at Potomac Ranch, or Potomac Hill. It took place the 12th and 13th of May. It was considered the final battle of the Civil War. Nearly everyone in the United States and the morbid-bound Confederate states consider the Civil War over. Both of the South's principal armies had capitulated. Lieutenant General Richard Taylor had surrendered most of the remaining Confederate forces east of the Mississippi. President of the Confederate States, Jefferson Davis, had just been captured, and his cabinet had scattered to escape Yankee vengeance. Even the elusive Confederate guerrilla William Quantrill had been fatally wounded. Arrangements were underway for a grand review, a victory parade in Washington. Almost a month after the final battle, the official end of the Civil War was June 2nd, 1865. Some after effects. The Civil War was the most tragic wars in American history. More Americans died than all other wars combined. Brother fought against brother, and nation was torn apart. In the end, we must look at the important consequences of the conflict. These are a few of the after effects of the Civil War. First, the nation was reunited and the southern states were not allowed to secede. The South was placed under military rule and divided into military districts. The southern states then had to apply for readmission to the Union. The federal government proved itself supreme over the states. Essentially, that was a war over states' rights and federalism, and the victor was the power of the national government. Slavery was effectively ended. While slavery was not officially outlawed until the passage of the 13th Amendment, the slaves were set free upon the end of the Civil War. Reconstruction, the plan to build America after the war began. Industrialism began as a result of the increase of wartime production and the development of new technologies. These are my references. I hope that you can look at your list and say, wow, I learned a lot more than I knew before about the Civil War. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.